That's a
movie
Dumb and
references.
Dumber's not obscure.
Hey, everybody! We are live on YouTube with the legend Don Purdy. How you
Right.
doing, Don?
I'm good. If you just started recording, you missed a good Dumb and Dumber quote.
Yeah. Well,
Better
thank you.
than Wayne's World, probably. I don't need to do that deer in
Yeah.
the headlight stare anymore because this is our second time live.
Second
I feel
time
pretty
ever.
good about
Second
it,
time
yeah.
ever live. We have a couple of special treats today. We have our guy Marlon Kerner, who's going to join us in just a couple minutes, and he's gonna tell us the story of his career. His story with his knee, the ACL, and we're gonna talk about obviously OBJ. We're gonna talk about the game last night with Marlon. But before we do that, I think the topic of the morning or the afternoon will definitely switch to Odell Beckham and the pursuit of him as a free agent.
What, really?
Yeah. And our guy Don over here was instrumental in the pursuit of many big names like Mario Williams, Chris Spielman, T.O., some that, the Bills landed and some that they didn't. So I was just hoping, Don, that maybe you'd be able to start walking us through what it's like internally when they decide to pursue a free agent, and then maybe a couple stories of guys that you did and didn't land.
Yeah, no, I know Marlon's backstage nodding his head about Chris Bowman. I'm sure he remembers him. That was during his time, but it's a big deal. Where again, scouting department is composed of a college scouting department and a pro scouting department, and obviously this is the pro scouting department's time of year. So with OBJ, it's kind of he's the caliber where it's an all hands on deck situation. Assistant GM John Guy when he was there. Tom Donahoe had a college. He had like 2 assistant GMs, and John was in charge of pro personnel. So he would literally, before free agency started or when a big free agent was coming in, he would tell the stadium operations department, I need you to literally go to every staircase, vacuum every square inch of the carpet in the whole building, a white glove treatment on the railings of he didn't want.
Something tells me that Odell Beckham does not check the dust level. But right. No,
yes,
right,
yes,
right.
Yes. So that is part of it. But it's funny with some stories I remember going back. John Butler was GM. Schatz and I, we were leaving at the end of the day, and this is before email. This is before the internet. So now everyone knows, the whole world knows OBJ is going to One Bills Drive. We in the building didn't even know when a free agent was coming. So you're headed toward the elevator on the second floor, and coming out from the right from John Butler's office was John and Chris Spielman. And they're talking, they're having a chat, and we're like, oh, we recognize right away. Oh my gosh, that's Chris Spielman. So we all kind of converge at the elevator before the doors open. And they stopped talking, but for all we knew, it was just a lull in the conversation for like 3 seconds. And John looks at us. He's like, gentlemen, you've got the Chris Spielman right here. Aren't you going to say hello? Like, it didn't even occur to us to say, John, we've talked about it in the program.
Yeah.
There's no way I was just going to.
Yeah, no. Right. I didn't speak to Mr. Butler until I was spoken to.
Nah, he was that kind of guy. So probably the years later, when Terrell Owens came in, that was big. When his happened early in the year, and it was kind of the same thing. There was a lot of discussion though, like about whether we should bring on. We had a good young team. It was Eric Wood, Andy Levitri. We were feeling really good about the draft and building a young team. And he was kind of acting bizarre.
Sure, and that's actually really relevant today. So the process of deciding whether to entertain Odell Beckham. Obviously, the season is 2/3 over. The chemistry in the locker room. Is there like a players' council? Is there like a captains group?
The captains that for something like this, I'm sure they're being insulted. Again, when Marlon comes on, I'd love to have him talk about how it affected the team in the locker room. But do they have a contract already ready for Odell? Contract terms are ready.
Yeah. Does Odell's agent know that before you is that pre because obviously at this point he's decided between a couple different teams. Yeah. Is that have you already discussed that with the agent?
Yeah, I mean, if he's coming in for visit, then at least the parameters of a deal are kind of known, minus incentives. You of course don't know what the other team's going to offer.
Sure,
that's being discussed for sure.
Okay, so there's a parameters of a deal. So if he says, "Hey, I really like it here," is that something where you can get that contract to him in 15 minutes? Because you don't want to let him out the door.
the terms of the contract, a verbal agreement, yes.
Okay.
But I mean, and that's part of, like, for me, Jim Overdorf was handling the contract negotiations. I worked for him. So I was putting together what was called an electronic contract, and ECRS had to go to the league. And I was getting the contract as it was coming in pieces parts. And so I was putting every section has to go in the right section, whether it's likely to be earned or not, whether it's prorated over the course of many years or not. So I'm putting that together so that when the agreement hopefully comes to terms, that thing is ready to go. But it's a laborious situation. While other execs are likely taking the free agent up to dinner at Tempo or Chop House became the
Hey, shout out to Aaron Quinn. We figured that out yesterday, that Tempo was the spot on Delaware.
Yeah, I caught part of that. Yeah, with Aaron and Chris Kepner. So Chop House became, I don't know if that was 09. Meanwhile, the mayor of Buffalo, who did the second for my book, gratuitous plug, thank you very much, or gave him the key to the city, I think, just because it looked like he was coming in. I don't know the exact timing of that. But when we finally met him, it took me a while to meet him because put it this way, there was a marketing emphasis that I know you talked about. I was in Aaron's show yesterday. I literally heard some folks that were in charge at the time saying, now this will help sell out Toronto.
There you go. Okay. Well, there you go.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't think it did.
Yeah.
But it told you where the focus was.
Right. Yeah. So today, let's say whenever he flies in, he's going to be brought down. Will the trainers look at him? Will they give him a physical?
He'll get a physical.
Okay.
Probably this one requires the doctors who just coming back last night from.
Sure. How do you think this differs? So how does this differ? Like with him.
Good call, because we're going to talk to Marlon about the AL, which he famously has. So absolutely, his health and immediate availability is paramount.
Right. Do you think that this differs? So let's say they're bringing in a street free agent, like when they got John Brown back last week. Is Odell treated differently than? Okay, how? What's different? Other than taking the Josh Allen house or all of that stuff. Building, sure, of course it is. Yeah. Is it? So, do you get a first class ticket here? You think? Plane ticket?
I'm sure he did. Yeah,
probably get black car, pick him up at the airport.
Yeah, if not a private plane. I don't know. To be sure, Williams we picked up in a private plane.
Okay.
Threw him there. And
you think the private plane might be in use here because you're competing against Jerry Jones?
Odds are it is. I would be kind of surprised if it wasn't. Yeah, because it all matters. Okay. He's gonna take into account everything. Maybe not. Whether or not this stairway railing has dust on it or not. But
sure,
you can't leave that to chance.
Of course, we're gonna bring in Marlon now, and we're gonna discuss a bunch of stuff, and then we're gonna come back after we talk to Marlon, and Don's gonna share a couple more stories about free agent pursuits and the guys that he was able to land, and maybe a story of a guy that they weren't able to land. As going forward.
We got a couple, but I'm excited to talk to Marlon. We'll bring him in. I want to give him a proper introduction here too.
There's our guy, Marlon.
There he is. I'm good. How you doing, Marlon? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys. Sorry, I was putting on mute. Used to the Zoom and used to getting this. Lead the mic off first.
We're learning. We're still rookies at this. It's fun. But there we go. We got you on. So, hey, Marlon, I know Bills fans are familiar with you, but let me remind them some things that they may or may not know. By the Bills from the Ohio State University. We're not going to talk about last week, I promise. 4 seasons as CP, a quarterback with the Bills, including 3 of which were playoff seasons. He fought back from not one but 2 ACL tears, has a very successful post-career in the league, including as a player engagement director at the Bills, where I had the privilege of working with him. He's very active in Western New York business community and with other NFL player engagements to help players in their own post-careers. Marlon, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. To be honest, full disclosure, our show has been about the 1990 season. You're the first real everyone that has had some kind of tie to that. You're the first one that really hasn't. You came in 95. So we're making an exception for obvious reasons because of the events relevant to the day. So thanks.
Marlon, one of the things I like to ask everybody who we've had on the show, what are your memories of draft day, and where did you find out you were going to be drafted, and were you pleased with coming to Buffalo, and B, when you were selected?
Yes to all those things. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had an interesting senior season at Ohio State. We just didn't play well. I think we ended up losing 4 games that year. We did beat Michigan that year. That was the first year that John Cooper beat Michigan in his career. I think he ended up going like 2-13-1 or something like that. So not a lot of success. Not a lot of success during his tenure as a head coach. But what I remember the most was the draft was 2 days, right? Like you would start at noon, you would just watch TV all day. And so you would watch on ESPN, then it would go to ESPN2, and it was like the longest production. So I went to the combine, did all those things, and they were like, hey, you would go anywhere from 3 to 7. I was like, okay, no problem. So I'm thinking I'm gonna just watch my friends get drafted on the first day, just kind of hanging out. My mom, when I turned 18, she got married to my stepdad, and he was in the Air Force. So they were in Germany. And so I had family there. So the time the draft came back, my mom, we all came down. We were at my aunt's house. Now in Ohio, they had ESPN 1, ESPN 2, and then you had like some sports channel. So I was asking my aunt, like, do you have ESPN2? Like, yes, I got it. I'm like, make sure it's not the sports channel because we can't watch the draft. So just make sure, double check. I double checked. I have it. Okay. Kind of ominous that I had to keep asking, did you double check? For some reason, she didn't double check and assumed that the sports channel was ESPN2. So once 7 o'clock hit, I did not get to see the draft. So So I'm hanging out with my family, my friends. We're just relaxing. And, I'm just like, hey, like, let's go bowling. Like, hey, it doesn't look like you're going to get drafted tonight. Like, let's go to the bowling alley. I'm like, sure. Like, no problem. Let me check the ticker because they still will put all the draft on the bottom like they do the ticker now. And so I go in and it says it's the 3rd round. I'm like, hey, they said I could go in this round. I'm not sure if I'm going to get drafted, but let's just take a couple minutes and see where they are. And so I'm upstairs. We're all in one room, and it's just scrolling across the bottom, and it's just like, here's this, here's that. And now I have a cousin the same age, and she was told, "Don't get on the phone." Right? Like,
yeah, no call waiting back then, right? No, does he signal?
We had to call waiting, but you wanted to hear the phone ring, so she's on the phone, unbeknownst to anyone in the house. And so I'm standing there, and it's me, some friends of mine from high school that I grew up with, this people that I was friends with from college, and we were all just hanging out in this room. And I literally have on a coat, like because it was pretty cold that day. And all of a sudden, my cousin calls out like, "Marlon," and I'm like, "Yes," and she says, "Telephone." I'm like, "Telephone? I didn't hear the phone ring. Who is it?" And she says, "I don't know, some guy from the Buffalo Bills." And so you can hear a pin drop in the house. Like everybody's like, "Oh my gosh!" So I pick up the phone, and Dwight Adams is on the other end. And Don, you know how Dwight had the country drawl and his voice.
Famous drawl, yes.
Marlon Kerner. And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he just says, "Congratulations, you're a Buffalo Bill." And we sat there, we listened a little bit. He gets on the phone, he talks. I talked to Coach Levy. I talked to John Butler briefly. And then I got the hug from my mom and my brother and everyone. And then I just ended up going bowling for the rest of the night. That's all I did. I just went bowling. That's it. I said, okay, let's go bowling. We can go now. I got drafted in the 3rd round. Didn't think I was going to go that high, but I was like, just let me get there wherever I get drafted. I don't really care. And I had no idea that Buffalo was interested in drafting me at all. Like they didn't say it. They came to one of my workouts, and the only interaction that we had was, "What'd you eat for breakfast?" Because I ran a 4.35 40 on the same day that Joey Gallery happened to run a 4.17 40. So there goes all my thunder of running this great 40 time because he runs a 4.17. And that was it. John Butler said, "What'd you eat for breakfast?" I said, "Pancakes." And he said, "You should eat those more often." And that was the interaction, the only interaction that we had. And I had no idea that Buffalo was interested in bringing me. But I'm so glad that they did bring me here.
Yeah, I like the serendipity of you bowling without knowing that that's like one of Buffalo's favorite games. So, right? That
Right.
no, that's great. We had Jamie Mueller on. He and at Benedictine, he came in the league about 5 years, 7 years before you. They had one phone on the floor of their dorm, and in order to make sure that they could only get one call, I think he had two offensive linemen guarding each end of the hall to make sure no one could get near the phone. But no, that's great. So we obviously ACL is the acronym du jour here with Trey White. Coming back from it, he looked pretty good last night, and OBJ famously having it. Marlon, you, of course, I just said you had one but two. Take us back to that journey. Full disclosure, you kind of shared it with me the other day, and I was captivated. And love for our audience to hear about it.
Yeah, so it was just one of those. We had a really good conversation the other day. You're right, and I was just kind of saying, I'm the example of why you don't rush Trey White back. In full disclosure, it was my third year. I think we went 6-10 that year. Todd Collins was the starting quarterback. That was just an interesting season. We just did not play well. We thought we were going to be a lot better, and for some reason, we just didn't play well in a lot of games. But for me, I was just having some fun. I was back playing nickel corner. We had Jeff Burrs coming back from an ACL injury, and all those, or second year back, full year season back from an ACL injury, but he was having some complications a little bit. So I was spelling him, but was the nickel corner and was having quietly a pretty good season. And so even though we didn't win, I was kind of making some plays on the ball, had some good pass breakups, a couple interceptions, and was just like, all right, good season going so far. And we played the Jets here. It was right after, actually, the timing was almost to the T of how when Trey tore his ACL, right after Thanksgiving, we were playing the Jets. We come here, and I played special teams, and so I was the punt gunner. And I remember this play to a T because I lined up and I had two choices. They were double teaming us on the gunner, so you could have two guys, and it was tough. And back in the day, you could do a lot of holding and clutching and grabbing and tackling of guys. And so I was trying to figure out which was the least path of resistance for me to get down there and make a play on the gunner, as a gunner rather. And I was going up against a guy. His name was Corin Brown, I believe. And we had played against each other many a times because he played for that team up north. I'll go ahead and continue with no M's here. And so we were joke because you would see guys you played against in college throughout the league. And so we were just catching up, hey, what's going on? How's everything? And we would talk trash to each other as usual. And he was like, you're not getting anywhere near me today. You're not going to beat me at all today. And so I thought about going outside. And I was like, nah, I'm going to take the inside. And so I shot down really flat inside, and I was going to bend it back out. And I had to go so flat, I ended up getting caught up in the wash of everybody else trying to come back out and get down on their blocks. And so I almost ran on the back of one of our players. And so instead of knocking him off, I did the stop and I jumped in midair to not step on his feet. And so when I planted to cut and come out of it, the person blocking him was running right behind him. And he literally just took that left knee out. It was in mid-stride, foot was planted firmly on the turf, no give. And so it was one of those boomerang effects. He hit it, my knee went forward, and I literally felt everything. I felt the pop. I literally could feel like that. It just felt like you snap your fingers and then it snapped back. And so I felt the most excruciating pain I'd ever had in my entire life in that left knee. And I mean, imagine trying to run full go inside, somebody hits you and you literally stop and drop and grab your knee all in one motion. That was me. And so, the guys that were blocking, like, you all right? I'm like, no. And he's like, uh-oh. So they were sitting over top of me like, hey, get the trainers out here. Something's not right. And I had that sharp pain, and then the pain stopped. And so the Bills came out, they did their whole test. They're looking weird, and I'm looking at them, reading their facial expressions. They're like, okay. I'm like, this is probably not good. I'm like, I'm good. Let me get up. Let me walk off. And no, you can't walk. So that's when I knew, okay, this is probably more serious than I'm thinking it is. And so put me on the cart, wheeled me, drove me down. It's like, hey, we think you tore your ACL, but you need to get an MRI. Did the MRI the next day, full complete ACL tear. and a partial MCL tear because of the boomerang when it snapped back off of that, and then ended up having some cartilage damage as well. So I go get surgery. I decided to have surgery in Vail, Colorado, with Dr. Stetman, who did all the knee surgeries that when I was in the league. Then
I saw many of those invoices and bills. I paid a lot of those.
Can I ask you real quick, Marlon? How long after it happened did you know it was ACL? And like, did you know it like right away within 5 minutes when you were on the field? Was it the next day? Like, I guess as a fan and a viewer, you see Von Miller go down, or whatever else. You see him, the expression on his face on the golf cart going out. Like, did you know your season was over? Whatever the diagnosis was, like right on the field.
I was hoping it wasn't over. I was hoping that maybe it was just more of a knee strain or something, but it was so late in the season. I was just thinking like, well, it could be over just because it may take longer for this to rehab, but you're hoping it's not an ACL. But I knew once their body language and the facial expressions they were making, I was like, okay, this is probably more serious and it's probably some type of ACL injury, but hopefully it's kind of one of those, like, maybe it's not a complete tear. John Elway was kind of the poster child for us coming up because he played without an ACL. He just played with a big knee brace. So, in your head, you're thinking like, okay, could I finish the season out with a knee brace and then have surgery in the off season? I'm trying to process it. But once they gave me crutches and was like, hey, you can't drive, don't put any weight on this, I've kind of figured it was probably something a little bit more serious than just a knee sprain.
So you go to Colorado, you have the surgery. How long are you away from the team? I think people don't realize that, when you're rehabbing or you have surgery, like you're not, how long were you away from Buffalo?
Well, my experience was different because I had it happen in November. I didn't have surgery until December, like the middle of December, like December 15th, somewhere between December 15th and 18th, somewhere through there. And so we were just about to finish the season because we knew we weren't going to the playoffs. So we did the exit interviews. I was on crutches. And so then it was, are you going to do your rehab here or are you going to go away for the off season to do the rehab? And so we had a few conversations. They wanted me to stay in Buffalo and do the rehab. And I had one semester left or 1 quarter left because Ohio State was on quarters back then. And so I had 1 quarter left to graduate. And so while I was thinking about it, I said, well, you know what, just in case this knee thing doesn't work out, I should probably take these 3 classes and graduate. So I called all my advisors and said, hey, listen, I want to graduate. I need these 3 classes. Yep, that's available. That's available. I had to petition to take a different class to substitute for one of my major classes. So I filled all the paperwork, did that. It was approved, mailed a check overnight, like FedEx a check, said, here's all my tuition. Here's everything here. And then hopped on a plane to go have surgery for my ACL. So when I landed in Denver, the first thing I did was call my advisor and say, okay, did you get the check? Yep, you're good. Tuition's all full and paid. I will see you January 4th. And so I was already planning to go back and graduate. So that was kind of like, no, we want you here. No, I'm going to graduate. If you want me back once a week, I'll drive back. I'll fly back. I'm going to rehab at Ohio State and then come back and graduate and be here to finish rehab in March. So that's what I did. So literally January 4th, I'm on crutches. It's like 20 degrees. I still have stitches in my left knee because, I did the patella graft. So they take the graft out of patella tendon, they go in the back on the side and they put the graft in. So I had stitches where the holes were from the scope holes and then stitches right down the middle of my patella tendon and a knee brace so I couldn't bend it or lock it out. And I just hobbled the class until I was able to get the stitches out and then be able to walk. And so I did that for the first 3 months and then came back and everything was going well. Like I thought I was progressing. It's just, I had so much damage. I didn't realize how long it takes. Now, medicine has really caught up and understands that it's a year process and a year-long injury. I was trying to get back and be ready for training camp. So you can imagine having surgery in December and trying to be ready for July, which is a lofty goal and a crazy timetable to try to hit with today's standards. But that's what I was trying to do. And so I got to camp, I'm lifting, I'm doing all those things, I'm running around. We get to camp and the first day I practice and I get an interception in the first one-on-ones that we have. And then my knee balloons up. Like, I mean, it's just like this. It's a normal like this. And all of a sudden you just see fluid everywhere. And so they're like, well, We're going to wrap it. We're going to see if it calms down. And if it doesn't, then we're going to drain it. And so that was the first time I had my knee drained. And I would have my knee drained numerous times throughout that training camp. And so for anybody who's ever had a knee drain and never had a knee drain, I'm sorry for this cringeworthy description of it, but they took a needle, and the needle was literally about this long. And then they had a tube that was like this big. So think turkey baster, with a skinny needle at the end of it.
Did you watch?
And they literally stuck this needle in your knee, and they're moving it around, and they're trying to find the pocket of where the fluid is. And so I'm like, pocket? He's trying to explain it to me like, yeah, we're trying to find a pocket. Sometimes we hit it on the first try, sometimes we don't. So imagine this really thin needle, super long needle that gets jabbed into your knee. They rub it around and they're moving it, but you can feel it hit your bones. You can feel it hit. I'm feeling it like as they're moving it around, and they're pulling it, trying to find the fluid and find a pocket so they can suck the fluid out. And it took them a couple times the first time they did it. And so I was like, oh, we didn't get it. We pull it out, we stick it back in, and then they catch it. And then he's like, I'm hoping that this fluid is either yellow or clear. And I'm like, okay, so what if it's not? He said, if it's red,
as opposed to red, okay.
If it's red, then we have a problem. He's like, then that means there's a tear somewhere in there. And so what do you think the color of the fluid is? So they pull it out and they drain. I mean, it's bright red. It's just red. Like there's nothing there's no clear liquid in this thing at all. And I'm like, okay, so what now? It's like, well, you have a couple options. Like, we can send you back to Colorado and have you look at it, or we can see if it calms down, and maybe you just tore some scar tissue and things in there. And so maybe that's just what it is. So me being 24 and not really thinking, oh, this could be a career-ending injury like that, because everyone doesn't think it's going to happen to them. Yeah, let's just power through it. I have the opportunity to kind of start. It was myself, Ken Irvin, Thomas Smith, Jeff Burris, and we had a really solid secondary, and we could match up with anybody in the NFL. I thought we had one of the best secondaries in the league that year. So I was like, I want to play. So I did this like 3 or 4 times in training camp. Like I would play like a couple days, practice here and there. I didn't play in any preseason games until the last preseason game, and then I was cleared to play. And so we get to the first game. We play San Diego, and we go out there. And so I know you and I talked. And so I had been practicing, and it was swelling up like crazy. And you can never simulate game speed. And so people talk about what's the difference between the NFL and college. When you get to the game speed, it's just the amount of information they give you, but how fast and how precise you have to move. And the speed of the game is so much more faster than what you've already been accustomed to. And you can never really replicate that even in practice. And so I try to go out there and run around, and my knees start swelling up in the middle of the game. So much so that I go and say, we need to drain this at halftime, because I was so used to the procedure and the process. I'm like, just drain it. I'll be okay. We'll go back out. I'll play. And if I can make it through the season, we can get whatever needs to be done in the off season, and I'll be okay. And I'm running as a punt gunner again. I never got hurt backpedaling. It was always being a punt gunner. And I'm running down on punt gunner. And I had so much fluid on my knee that it ended up backing up towards my thigh and into my quad. And it caused just a slight misfire in the middle of me running in strides. And so my left leg buckled and my right leg was up in the mid stride. So when my left leg buckled, I dropped like this, but my right foot caught in the turf because I was in the middle of running like that. And it just caught the turf. And again, same thing, felt the snap, like literally felt the pop. Like that's all it was, a little pop. I didn't think I tore it. I was just like, oh, that hurt. I got up, I walked off. They checked it, drained my knee at halftime, came back out and felt this crazy crunch. I was like, I'm done. I'm not playing anymore. Something's not right. Got the MRI the next day. Hey, you tore your other ACL and you're done. And then you just get into the business of, can I run? Can I do this? And that was it. That was the last time that I ever got to step back on the field and so in hindsight, you're always like, man, what if I had done things differently? What if I had chosen this? But I never lived like that. But it was kind of like, man, like this sucks, because if I had got my knee looked at before, maybe we could have figured out that I had they call it flapping cartilage. So where your knee runs like this, you have cartilage that protects the whole thing. So in the trochlear groove of my knee, the cartilage would lay flat, but then it would flap open. And so they needed to go in and repair that. So I had to get a microfracture after having my right ACL fixed. So imagine having your right ACL fixed after having done your ACL on your left leg about 9 months before, then having about 8 weeks later to have your left leg then redone as a microfracture and being non-weight bearing for another 8 weeks and having to sit in what they call a CPM, a continuous perpetual motion machine, for 8 hours a day. That's what I did to try to get back on the field. But yeah, it's just a crazy, grueling rehab process to try to get back on the field.
So when you see guys now, I guess a frustration of mine and Don's and probably people who watch the Bills, the guys were giving Troy a hard time on social media. Hey, why aren't you back? Like it's not specific for every player. Obviously, every player's different. But can you talk about like the mental hurdle that maybe he or OBJ would be facing coming back from this? I mean, you got to be afraid in some ways. Like, I mean, you guys are brave and professional athletes, but the mental toll and the mental hurdle of coming back and trusting your body to perform correctly, so something does happen like what happened to you. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah, and Marlon, before you do that, that's a great question. You said something to me the other day about, because I brought up Rod Woodson, how he kind of famously came back less than a year, but you talked about the difference between playing safety corner and the demands on the position. Just that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like when Rod Woodson came back, and like, again, every athlete is different, right? So for me, and that's the thing about Trey, like, and I can lump them all together. So for me, I had a very traumatic injury. It was not just ACL, it was ACL, it was a big chunk of cartilage, and it was an MCL that I didn't have to have surgery. It healed on its own. So I had very traumatic injury that is going to alter how my leg was going to be when it was all said and done. If I remember correctly, I think Rod was strictly ACL. So it was just fix the tendon, get everything strong around it, and his knee and everything else was going to be fine. So the cushion was there. For me, the cushion, they took out the portion of the cartilage on the outside of my knee. So when your knee bangs, like, it was kind of like a little overlap. So I always was going to have a little bit of a knee bang, a bone on bone banging from where they took out the cartilage for me. So that changed that. And so when you think about every athlete, you kind of, the one thing is, it's not just mental, it's the physical grueling part of it, because we talk, I learned so many terms, but we talk about proprioception and muscle memory, right? So as an athlete, and as Trey, when we backpedal, I've done that 1,000 times. I've had so many reps on how to backpedal. If I turn my foot this way, if I do this, I automatically know where that foot's going to be, where it's supposed to be. When you have an ACL surgery, and then depending on how severe the injury is, that gets thrown off, and that can get thrown off by 10 degrees, 5 degrees. And so that little step now is not the same. It doesn't feel natural. And so now you're trying to learn all that over. I'm trying to learn, okay, if I could close my eyes and be like, I can backpedal in my sleep, and I know I'll be on this line. I can see it. I can do all those things. So before you even get into the mental aspect of it, that part, you have to really learn how your foot's going to be, how your body's going to respond. If I do this, it's this. When I break, I come here, because if you plant too much, it's too far back, and I have to adjust all those things. And so that's what Trey has to learn in the first part of it. And then you have to go in and say, okay, now how does it feel? When I run, do I still feel the burst that I used to have? When I need to, can I diagnose it? As mentally, you're like, I'm there, but he hasn't played in a year. So he has to get back into all those rhythms, all those things that you do to play at an elite level. And I think sometimes we don't think about that as fans, because you don't understand all that goes into to be a really elite athlete sometimes. And so sometimes it's always good to hear it on the other side, like, well, this is why. And so this is why they wait, and they continue to wait, because you need him to feel comfortable. You need him to feel like physically, I can go out and do everything that I was doing before I got injured. Mentally, I'm in a great place. Like, I trust the injury. I trust that I'm not going to injure myself. I trust that I can burst and do what I need to do. And it's a business. If we're going to be honest as well, we have to make sure we talk about the business part of it too, because he has a very nice contract, and not saying that the Bills will do that, but Don and I both know in this business, anytime you can use something against a player, sometimes organizations do like, hey, you know what? I need you to take a pay cut. You're not the same player, or you're not this. So you always have to go and play all those things. And I think players understand their worth and their value now. And so players are in a position to kind of say, yeah, I'm not going out there until I feel 100%. And so I think that's kind of the evolution of the game. When I played, like, we wore it as a badge of courage. Like, I'm fighting through injuries, and I'm okay with guys pushing through injuries, but there's a fine line of pushing through an injury and hurting yourself and your career, and your team as well, by pushing through something where you should just take a day off or wait until you're 100% to come back.
That's awesome. We promised our listeners that they would hear about an ACL, and that was It's thorough and like fascinating.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's.
Do you
that's
have
awesome.
You watched the game last night?
I did watch the game last night, of course.
What are your thoughts? Give me your thoughts on where they are last night and where you think they're going for the rest of the year.
I think they're going up this for the rest of the season. I think what I saw a few things. One, they actually ran the ball. I'm like, yes, finally we ran the ball, right? We had 132 yards rushing, and it made, they spread it around, but that's going to help. And you had Dion out, so they're only going to get better in the rushing. But I was impressed that they were able to really attack the middle of that Patriots D-line and get movement with Mitch Morris back and the two guards. Quessenberry, I thought he gritted it out. Like, you always talk about guys kind of like fighting through injuries. You could tell he was not 100%. And so I give him 100% props for he literally played on one leg. And I was surprised that the Patriots didn't try to attack him more. But I also like that we adjusted our game plan to try to get the ball out of Josh's hand. Once we got to that second and third quarter, like get the ball out quick, like give him something. So I love what they did there. Our defensive line wreaked havoc the entire game. I love the depth that we have. And, we look like, hey, Rousseau came back. He looked great. AJ Epinesa popped in and looked great. Boogie Basham. Those guys did an amazing job. Bringing Tim Settles and Jordan Phillips back and adding Shaq Lawson. Shaq has just energy for days, and he can play tackle and end. So he gives you some flexibility there. But I loved it. I love to see Trey back. I thought he looked really good. They didn't attack him, and I loved it. But he looked quick. He looked like he was all right back in the scheme of things. So I was like, all right, this is going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see what happens there. But I still don't like the Josh takes some hits, and I'm like, when he jumped, I'm like, don't jump, no, please.
That was terrifying, right?
I love it. They did posters and memes about it, but man, you get you don't have to do that. You already got 7 yards. You don't need 9 to get the first down.
Get down, man. Get down.
Exactly.
Do you want to play the 2-minute warning with Marlon here?
I would love to. Let me take back to one scenario in terms of free agency. Not all free agents get a lot of fanfare. There was a game in '96, I think, against Dallas, and there was a player that was like player of the game that I had never heard of a week before, Manny Martin. Do you remember? Well, he had like 3 interceptions. Like, holy cow, who is this guy, right?
I love Manny. Yeah, man, I still talk to Manny now. So, yeah, but that was like the Bills scouting department were really good about finding guys and gems like late in the rounds, free agents they could bring in, and they were plug and play. And Manny Martin was just one of those guys that he could play corner, he could play safety. We ended up using him as safety, nickel. When we went dime, he was just there. He could spell Henry Jones if we need to bring Henry Jones and match him up on a tight end. He could go on the opposite of Kurt Schultz if there's an injury. He was just one of those guys. But again, like to your point, he was kind of out. I think he played a little bit in the Canadian League as well. And I think he played in Toronto for the Argos. And I'm just like, dude, where'd you come from? And then hearing his story, and you're like, oh, and he went to an HBCU. And then, so, that's kind of how, when we came out, you needed to go to big schools to kind of get the real look. Now you'll see guys that can go to smaller schools and HBCUs and they'll go first round now. So that, I think, that's where the focus has gone, where it doesn't matter what school you go to now, they'll find you if you have talent. And sometimes when I came out, it was, you may have had talent, but you might come as a free agent or a really late round draft pick. But yeah, Manny Martin, good guy, funny dude, but a really good player, a great find free agency.
All right.
That's awesome. So, Marlon, before we let you go, we play something called the 2-minute warning. We're going to ask you 10 questions. Hopefully we get it under 2 minutes.
I didn't prep them for this.
So. Perfect. All right, Don. All right, rapid fire, Marlon. Let's go ahead, Don.
Most interesting place to watch a Bill game for you?
Probably in my house. I have my own little man cave that has scarlet and gray on the walls, and then a lot of Buckeye stuff around. But I always watch all my Bills game there. So
3 people, dead or alive, you'd want to have dinner with?
I would love to go back and talk to MLK for certain. I would love to go back and talk to Malcolm from that era, and then really, you know what? I wish I could just have dinner one more time with my grandmother, because such a big part of my life, and I miss her, and she got to miss all this. So she got to see me play, but she hasn't been here for the last 20 years. So I would love to go back and touch base with her.
Yeah. You're entering a room, grand entrance with dry ice. What is the song you choose to come to?
Oh, I'm a Tupac guy, so any Tupac song coming in, I can roll with that. You can anyone except for California Love, just not California Love.
Best concert you've ever been to? Is it Tupac?
No, honestly, the one concert I went to that I really enjoyed the most, I went to go see Kenny G and Tony Braxton, and Kenny G held a note for like 5 minutes, and I was like, how in the world do you play the saxophone and hold a note for 5 minutes? But I was blown away. But that was probably one of the best concerts that I'd ever gone to.
Nice. Your favorite restaurant here in Buffalo and the dish that you like the most?
I'm a steak guy, so I love Chop House, Black and Blue. But my favorite restaurant probably to go to, and I can't have tomatoes anymore, but Mulberry's. I love Mulberry's. I love the food they have there. So I would go there all the time, but I just can't eat tomatoes any longer due to tomato allergies. So I would get some I would get the chicken marsala.
Favorite cartoon as a kid?
Oh, Bugs Bunny all day.
Yeah, all right.
All day, Bugs Bunny.
A popular food, but you hate it. You get one.
Brussels
sprouts.
And hummus. I don't like hummus, and everybody's like, "I love hummus." I can't eat hummus. I don't like hummus.
Give me your most annoying Michigan story.
See, you changed that. I like it. Well played.
I love that. So my most annoying Michigan story is I can't stand any of we can't stand those guys really, except for Jay Remersma. I like Jay Remersma, but my senior year when I was coming to Ohio State, they had a guy named Trent Zinkowitz who had the worst back as a high schooler that I'd ever seen. He was already doing electric stem shock on his back as a high schooler, and he came. We were at the Ohio All-Star game, and he talked about how Michigan was better because they recruit players like me, and Ohio State sucks because they recruit players like you. He was so arrogant, so cocky. And I was like, if everybody's like that, then no wonder I hate Michigan. And so from that day, I already grew up with a dislike for Michigan, but that helped solidify the fact that I hated Michigan and I would never root for anybody.
Beautiful. Two more.
Fueled the fire. Yes. Can you drive a stick shift?
I can drive a stick shift, not well anymore because I haven't driven it in a long, long time.
All right, last one here. Can you sing 5 seconds of the Ohio State fight song for us?
Of course. As a matter of fact, I'll do one better for you. I keep it.
Oh, there you go. It's beautiful.
I already have it right there. Like, you want another fight song? There it is. So fight the team across the field. Show them Ohio's here. Yes, I have it. The entire thing.
Thanks so much for your time, Marlon. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. You're awesome. All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Soon.
All right. So he's still. Right. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that interview with him. I know we had a couple of audio issues at the beginning, and it was a little glitchy, but I think all in all it was great. Oh, Aaron Quinn is known as a known Michigan fan. Oh, Chris Kepner just told us that Aaron. So sorry about that, Aaron. Obviously, you had the last laugh last week.
That's the same second week in a row. Jay Remersma came out.
Yeah, right.
Luke Russer liked him a lot.
Yeah.
He kind of tolerated him.
And one of my best friend's fiancés at the time really liked Jay Remersma too, but for different reasons. Thought he was a very handsome man, and that's actually funny because when we went to the Christmas party, she was there and she was infatuated with Jay, and I think Jay had a girlfriend at the time, and clearly she was with my buddy. But she got a picture with him. And she made it very well known that she liked Jay Remersma, but he became a great player quite quickly.
My neighbor Janelle told me that she thinks Matt Milano's a nice looking guy.
Oh, I see.
So Jason was there. He's in our band, and I hadn't told him yet, but I'll see. Maybe I can have him whacked or something. I know people over there. Just kidding.
So, do you have any more free tales or stories for us from? Give me something about Mario Williams.
Mario Williams that was the biggest. I know that you talked about that with Chris and Aaron yesterday, but yeah, it was. I remember about a week before free agency, Jim Overdorf came to me and said, hypothetically, if we were to bring in a guy like Mario Williams, what could you do? And I'm like, hypothetically or really? He's like, kind of read between the lines.
Sure.
Buddy Nix is going to do this. Pass rush was clearly an issue the year before. There was no bigger prize on the market than him. So that every tool available was employed to bring him in on the private jet. They brought his fiance in, and they brought in, I think Gretchen Getter from Community Relations was told, you are going to show her the best of Buffalo. They'll be together at some points, but when Mario does this with the team, because Mario, apparently from the conversations, it became apparent that part of the reason to come here or not come here would be if his fiance from Houston liked it here.
I was going to say, there's a recognition when you were there that this is Buffalo, right? Like, not hadn't been good in a while. The weather, the whole stigma.
I love that point because it was March, as free agency always is,
and it wasn't 70 degrees that they got here.
75 for like a week.
Yeah,
and we're like, no one tell them that this is not normal.
right. So did they? I mean, they have to go in thinking you were going to have to be like the highest money bidder usually.
Yeah. I mean, given the fact that you're still, playoff out, we knew money was going to be
was that well known? Like, did the agent say to you, "Hey, to get in the bidding, you got to bid 10% more than the Patriots or the Colts or wherever at the time"?
Jim Overdoor did most of the talking with the agent. So, but in talking with him a lot. Yeah, he knew money's an issue, but Buddy and he had worked on the cap, and room was there. For I think it was the first $100 million.
Were you surprised he signed here?
Yeah, I was. I mean, we had Kyle Williams and Darius was there. Like, holy cow, this guy! If he sees the big picture, and he did bring in one defense. And I have the voicemail somewhere. But, my job was to get him his signing bonus check. It was still a check. And he called, hey, this is where I send my money. I think I have the voicemail somewhere.
Do you remember how much the check was for?
I mean, in millions, even after taxes.
Even after taxes.
Yeah, it was crazy just to look at.
So Patrick Walsh asked, any strange requests that free agents have had in their visits?
Strange requests. Well, there was when Jim Schwartz, not a player or a coach, came in. We had a bad defense, and whatever it was that he had gotten fired from the Lions, and they asked me to pick him up at the airport. And I don't know if this was a strange request or not, but so I picked him up. I kind of knew he looked like he wouldn't know what I looked like, but a cell phone. And I said, hey, I'm at the gate here, or not the gate, but
terminal. Yep.
So we were getting into a car, my car, and the baggage handler, obviously a Bills fan, was like, Jim Schwartz, oh my gosh, we're so glad you're here. So that was a good sign. Like, he strokes their bill a little bit. But then, as we were leaving, literally in a car exiting the airport, they had just implemented a new parking ticket. Like, they were getting rid of the people that handled. So you had to put your card. Everyone knows it now, but it's new at the time.
Sure.
And it wasn't working. So I went to a different gate.
Oh, geez.
And then finally the lady came out and she was like, oh, that one doesn't work, and try this one. She had to help me with it. And as we're doing it, I'm like, and Jim Schwartz, he goes, is this what happened to you guys when you brought Mario Williams in?
Oh, wow.
No, but he was real nice, and he told me on the car.
Wow.
The way to here, One Bills Drive, I was going to take him to meet the coaches. The whole story about the Ford family let him go, and it's funny because with my job as a startup company, after I left the Bills, the Eagles were a client of ours, so I was visiting the Eagles, and he was with the Eagles, and he saw me in the hallway. He's like, "Hey, Purdy, you ever figure out that parking thing?"
Oh, how funny! Yeah, give you a little bit of shit, huh?
Yeah, a request. That would be a great question for the guys that were with the players. I would always see the players because they would say, hey, this is the office where you're going to pick up your pay.
So you know what's interesting now, and we talked about it a little this morning on the Spaces chat that we had, and I think it's very different now than it was 10 years ago. Most of the recruiting of OBJ probably happened at Josh Allen's house, right? Like, they're going to show him the building, they're going to do that, but then he's going to go with the guys. That the team during the drought years wasn't that tight knit. There weren't like the gravity of like star players.
If there was, Josh, years that there was a lot of camaraderie and brotherhood and friendship, the talent probably wasn't there.
Right.
The combination of the talent
Right.
and this
Sure.
is here with these 2022 Bills. It was just sometimes there was, we had this, but we didn't have that.
This reminds me so much of like 1990, right? And not just because that's
Somebody
what
make a
podcast
podcast
is,
about
right?
that, right?
But think
Yeah.
about it. It would be as if they're bringing in a free agent to go to Jim Kelly's house, because all the parties were at Jim Kelly's house after the games, and now all the buzz and everything I've seen is how Josh Allen's going to be available for OBJ to talk to, and it's the mini bye weekend, so they're probably going to hang. I would bet you they hang out at Josh Allen's house with Von and maybe
Sure.
a couple of the Stephon and whoever's going to stick around town, and it's the first time it feels like 1990, where if they were going to bring somebody in 1990, they probably would have gone to Jim's house, and Jim and Thurman and Andre and Bruce and Daryl and all those guys would be there, and they would have tried to recruit them there. So I don't feel like that would have happened in 2009. Like whose house are they going to?
Well,
J.D. Lossman's?
Mario Williams was 2012.
Okay.
T.O. was 2009. It's funny though, when we Drew Hull on, he talked about how much his dad missed the locker room camaraderie. He missed it deeply. It speaks to how important it is to those guys. So you're going to get, you have to spend hours and hours, every day, travel with them. And so if they get a good sense of going to Josh's house or wherever and feeling that, that's going to play a huge part in all this.
Plus, it's going to be, I think it's going to be appreciated by Odell that he knows that it's kind of the bye week, right? A lot of times the guys might take off and get out of Buffalo for 2-3 days. The fact that they won't or they don't, and that they're trying to recruit him, and they're all going to hang out at a house in Eden or Elma or wherever Josh built that house. Like, that's, as a player, I feel like that's probably the strongest thing that another player could do. You're giving him your time, and you're giving him your mini bye weekend where you might fly to Florida or whatever.
Just for a couple of days, somewhere nice, just for a couple of days. You're right, because in this 10-day stretch, they are going to get a couple of very precious, rare days during the season.
Right, and if they stick around town, and I would assume Von probably has some idea of how he wants this recruiting visit to go for his buddy and his friend, and I just think that there's no greater. He's not going to get that experience when he gets recruited by the Giants and the Cowboys. He's probably not going to hang out at a house in Elma. You can imagine how different. So I think it just comes down to which one he feels more comfortable with.
Well, the Von Miller point is interesting, given obviously everyone knows they played together at the Rams, and so Von obviously knows him a bit, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's being asked, hey, what is he like? Any tips? Anything that you think can help get us across the finish line here?
Before we go, I don't know if Aaron is still watching the broadcast here, but on the Twitter Spaces this morning, we talked about a little bit about the Patriots and kind of their demise and it's like an empire in decline, and the nepotism point on defense with Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick, and I think there's another Belichick running the secondary along with Steve, and he brought up Rob Ryan. So I figured it might be relevant again because we're not going to do.
Was that? Can we refer?
It was
no.
I feel like it's worthy that and Aaron said that was kind of the downfall of Rex, was bringing in his brother, and it was interesting last night watching that game, and like the Patriots just seem a mess. And he brings back Matt Patricia, he brings back Joe Judge, guys who are not a threat to him, and to like his little mini empire there with his family. And I made the equivalency of Syracuse basketball with Jim Boeheim, and he won't leave, and he has his sons there, and it's just everything seems to be declining. So could you maybe tell us like what went wrong in year 2 of Rex Ryan?
Okay, so you're not asking me to tell him.
Oh no, that's the next question.
All right, no, and the Cover One guys, I caught some of their shows, and they do a real good job of noticing those nuances and talking about them. But I guess what I could say is that Dennis in 2015, Rex's first year, was that 15 or 16? I think it was 15. Either way, first year, the defense was with Mario Williams and Darius and Kyle and Jerry Hughes, and they ranked the top 3, I think, and everyone knew their roles. And of course, during every play, players are mic'd only for a little while. I think, the designated players. And obviously things were running smoothly. And then, when Rob came in, and I know some of the guys, the Bills, that were also on those headsets, it was their job to make sure that the headsets were always working.
Sure.
Didn't have a lapse. So they heard the conversations, and they were discreet. They wouldn't tell any, blab it out and put it on social media. But personally, I had one in particular say, man, what a difference, between last year and the year that Rob came in, because number one, this had nothing to do with Rob at face value, but there were too many voices.
Yeah.
Suddenly guys were like, wait a minute, do we listen to Dennis Thurman or listen to Rob Ryan? Or I think even Rex got involved with the defense and, hold on, what are we doing? And you could see it. You could see, like, literally, I remember Jerry Hughes, like, putting his hands up, like, what's going on? All of a sudden they had to get, execute.
And the dynamic is different when the coach's brother is on the staff. Even if he's not technically in charge or the DC, you're going to listen to him because he's the coach's brother.
Yeah. And you got to figure, blood is thicker than water, so that carries.
So speaking of bodily fluids, can you tell us the Rob Ryan when we met him? This came up because we do a feature on our normal episodes where we do the wheel of Bills coaches, and the wheel one day landed on Rob Ryan. So Don usually shares a memory, it's amazing. It's amazing. The wheel plays no favorites. Maybe you could reshare that story before we wrap up here.
Real quick. It was my job to help every coach that came in, and there were way too many of them, but with their relocation. So I was one of those people they were supposed to meet. I would tell them what we would pay for, what we wouldn't pay for, what's taxable, what's not. Usually they would end up, say, hey, could you just talk to my wife and work this whole thing through? I said, of course. We would put them up with an apartment, give them a short-term vehicle. So I handled all that. And in a way, it was nice. I got to know the coaches well, where I otherwise wouldn't have maybe known him as well if not for that. But Rob had been here for a couple of days, and I still hadn't met him. All of a sudden, I got a call from one of the admin assistants in coaching, and she said, "Hey, Rob is ready to meet with you." Great. So, what office is he in? So I walked down to his office, and it was dark, but he was in the office next door talking to some coaches that he knew that he must have coached with before.
Right. Put you on ice.
And I was supposed to meet at like 2:00. And so I got there at, 1:58 or so. And so I just was hanging in his office alone, no light on. I'm just standing there, and I could hear him just holding court next door with all these coaches telling stories.
Oh, yeah.
They're having it all the time. And all of a sudden, it had to be close to like 2:10. He's like, oh, sorry, guys, I gotta meet with that pretty guy about relocation. And so I could hear him come around the corner. I literally, first time we ever laid eyes on each other, he's like, "Oh, hey, Purdy, what are you doing here?" And I implying
that you were jerking off.
Oh, stop.
Fair.
No.
That's how you told the story the first time.
I don't think I used that terminology.
Implying, I said.
Implying,
listen,
yeah.
but you know what? I know that's crass.
Like,
I understand.
no,
but this is the NFL. Like these guys talk like this. It's the culture of it. It is the.
Listen, you. Oh my gosh! I'm so glad you brought that up. On Monday, we are going to talk. To a person that literally, this is without exaggeration, in all of Bill's history, he is probably in the top 3 people in terms of the hours spent in a Bills locker room. Randy, Woody, Rick.
Yes.
And believe me, he's excited to come on. He's got great stories to share about with guys that he's literally been there through the 80s.
Everybody who will see the interview with him will recognize him from highlight films. Being he was the assistant manager for how many? 25 years?
Something like that. I've got to get that picture over to Aaron too. He just sent me a few. And
Woody's a great guy. Woody epitomizes a locker room. Like if you think of an NFL locker room, like Woody always fit in. Woody would welcome. Players loved him because he would do anything for the players. And as a staff member, he let you know where you stood. And he would welcome you in the Carl Mock type of way. I sure do. I'm gonna save that one for Monday. Just before we go, Chris did ask, did anybody try to convince Rex to not hire his brother? Like did
I don't know if anyone convinced. I mean, Rex was not some okay, no offense to Jeff Saturday or whatever, high school coach. I mean, he'd been a defensive coordinator in the league. He had I think, a horrible season
Rob,
with
yeah.
the Saints right before that.
But did anybody try to talk Rex out of it? Say, hey, but he was kind of riding high here after year one, right? He kind of was running the show, Rex.
All I can say is, if given the relative success the team had, at least the defense, his first year, if anyone would have said, if he would have said, yeah, I'm going to bring him in and we're going to have be an additional voice to this or that, if they could fast forward and think about how that would have played out, and him being that voice that obviously kind of mixed things up, they would have warned against him. But I don't know that anyone could have anticipated that.
Sure. Or talked him out of it. Rex was headstrong, right? Like, I mean, what are you gonna tell me I can't bring my brother in? Like, how do you, especially after having a fairly successful year one?
Right.
Like, he had more leverage then, and then it's amazing how quickly it just.
Dennis Thurman might have at least been thinking it.
Sure. He kind of undercut him. Yeah. Wow. Any more Rob Ryan stories before we go?
No. I think,
all right.
That one's.
We're excited to talk to Woody on Monday. I think people are going to be surprised and find it fun.
You talk about weather games. It was
Aaron I Black. He used to say Aaron I Black. Air for the helmets and I Black. Yeah. He'd run around the locker room. Pregame, halftime, Aaron I Black. I wonder. I'm going to ask him how many times he has said Aaron I Black over 30 years. Probably hundreds of thousands. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in today, and we'll see everybody on Monday. Thank you.
Look forward to it. All right.